"Babe, I lost my job," I said, my voice trembling as I walked into our Nashville apartment. I watched Marcus's face change from casual indifference to something much darker. The words hung in the air between us like a poison cloud, and I could see his mind racing behind those cold blue eyes I once thought were beautiful. "You what?" he snapped, dropping his phone onto the granite countertop with a sharp crack. "Charlotte, tell me you're joking." "My name is Charlotte Hayes, and I'm 35 years old. For the past 8 years, I've worked as a senior marketing director at Northrise Apparel, one of Nashville's most prestigious fashion companies. My job brought more than just a paycheck. It came with exclusive industry parties, networking events with celebrities, and connections that opened doors throughout the city. Marcus had always loved being my +1 to these events, charming clients and making contacts that somehow always seemed to benefit his struggling consulting business. But tonight, I was testing him. Earlier that day, I'd actually received the promotion of a lifetime, vice president of brand strategy, with a salary that would nearly double our household income. Instead of celebrating, though, I'd been haunted by a growing suspicion that had been eating at me for months. Marcus seemed more interested in my professional calendar than our personal life. He knew the names of my colleagues better than he knew my favorite restaurant. When I mentioned work stress, he'd ask about specific clients. When I suggested quiet nights at home, he'd remind me of upcoming industry events. "I'm sorry," I continued, forcing tears into my voice. "The restructuring hit my department hard. They let me go this morning." Marcus ran his hands through his perfectly styled brown hair, pacing our living room like a caged animal. "This is unbelievable. Do you understand what this means? The Morrison account presentation is next week. I was counting on you introducing me to their marketing team." Not once did he ask if I was okay. Not once did he offer comfort or reassurance. Instead, his first thought was about his business opportunities. My heart sank as I realized my worst fears might be coming true. "Marcus, I thought you'd be more concerned about me than your networking opportunities," I said quietly. "Concerned about you?" He laughed bitterly. "Charlotte, you just destroyed everything we've built. Your job wasn't just a paycheck. It was our entire social foundation. Without your position at Northrise, we're nobody in this city." The venom in his voice made me step backward. This wasn't the man I'd married 3 years ago. Or at least, this wasn't the mask he'd worn during our courtship. I met Marcus 4 years ago at a Northrise Apparel charity fashion show. He'd approached me during the cocktail hour, all charm and devastating smile, claiming he was interested in sustainable fashion consulting. Looking back now, I should have realized he'd researched the guest list and targeted me specifically. At the time, though, I was flattered by his attention and impressed by his knowledge of industry trends. Our early relationship had been a whirlwind of romantic dinners and weekend getaways, but I started noticing patterns after we moved in together. Marcus always seemed more energetic before my work events. He'd ask detailed questions about who would be attending, what they did, and how they might be useful for his business. When I'd come home exhausted from a long day, he'd perk up if I mentioned meeting someone new or landing a big client. "You're being dramatic," Marcus continued, still pacing. "You know how hard I've worked to build relationships in this industry. Your connections were supposed to help establish my consulting firm. Now what am I supposed to tell potential clients?" "Maybe you could tell them about your actual qualifications and experience," I suggested, my voice sharper than I intended. His face twisted with anger. "Don't act like you don't understand how business works, Charlotte. It's all about who you know, and you were my in. Without your job, we're just another couple struggling to make it in Nashville." I thought about all the times he'd encouraged me to attend networking events I didn't want to go to, how he'd practiced conversations about his business in our bathroom mirror before parties, how he'd always positioned himself strategically near influential people at industry gatherings. The signs had been there, but I'd been too trusting to see them clearly. "I've been supporting both of us financially for the past 2 years while you've been building your brand," I reminded him. Maybe it's time you actually started earning some income instead of just collecting business cards. This is exactly what I'm talking about, Marcus shot back. You've always looked down on my work. You've never understood the long-term strategy. Building a consulting business takes time, and your position was supposed to give me that time. The way he said, your position, made it sound like a tool rather than my career. I realized that, in his mind, I'd never been Charlotte the person. I'd been Charlotte the networking opportunity, Charlotte the social ladder, Charlotte the meal ticket to Nashville's business elite. So what happens now? I asked, curious to see just how far his selfishness would go. I don't know, he said, throwing his hands up in exasperation. I guess I'll have to figure out how to rebuild everything from scratch. This is just perfect timing, Charlotte. Really perfect. He grabbed his keys from the counter and headed toward the door. I need some air. I can't deal with this right now. The front door slammed behind Marcus with such force that our wedding photo rattled on the side table. I stood in the sudden silence of our apartment, processing what had just happened. In my darkest suspicions, I'd imagined he might be disappointed about losing social connections. But I'd never expected such cold, calculating selfishness. The man I'd married had just revealed himself as someone who saw me as nothing more than a professional accessory. I walked to our bedroom and opened my laptop, staring at the email from my boss that had arrived that morning. Congratulations on your promotion to Vice President of Brand Strategy, it read. Your leadership and vision have been instrumental to our company's success, and we're excited to see what you accomplish in this new role. The salary figure at the bottom of the email represented financial freedom I'd worked years to achieve, but now it felt hollow knowing my husband only valued me for what I could provide professionally. My phone buzzed with a text from my colleague Jasmine. Girl, I saw the announcement. Vice President before 36? You're killing it. Drinks tomorrow to celebrate? I stared at the message, realizing I couldn't share my joy with the person who was supposed to be my closest partner. Instead, Marcus was out somewhere, probably calling his sister Vanessa to complain about his useless wife who just lost her value to him. I thought back to our wedding day, when he'd promised to love me, for richer or poorer, in good times and bad. Those words felt like a cruel joke now. He'd loved me for my corporate credit card, my industry connections, and my ability to get him into exclusive events. Without those things, I was apparently just an obstacle to his ambitions. The apartment felt different now, like I was seeing it clearly for the first time. The expensive furniture we'd bought with my bonuses, the art we'd purchased at charity auctions I'd gotten us invited to, the designer clothes hanging in his closet that he wore to my work events, everything had been funded by my success, yet he acted like I owed him more. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on our balcony, looking out at the Nashville skyline. The city lights sparkled below, representing thousands of dreams and ambitions. I'd worked so hard to build my career, to earn respect in a competitive industry, to create a life I could be proud of. But somehow, I'd allowed Marcus to make me feel like my worth was tied to what I could do for him, rather than who I was as a person. Tomorrow, I would tell him the truth about my promotion. But tonight, I needed to process the devastating realization that my marriage might be built on a foundation as shallow as my husband's social climbing aspirations. The test had revealed more than I'd bargained for, and I wasn't sure our relationship could survive the truth about either of us. Marcus didn't come home until nearly midnight. I heard his key in the lock, followed by the careful footsteps of someone trying not to wake a sleeping spouse. I lay in our bed, eyes closed but very much awake, listening to him move around the apartment. Part of me wanted to confront him immediately, to end this charade and reveal my promotion. But another part of me needed to see how far his selfishness would go. The next morning, I found him at the kitchen table with his laptop and phone, surrounded by coffee cups and what looked like business plans. He barely glanced up when I entered. I've been thinking about damage control, he announced without any greeting or apology for his harsh words the night before. We need to start reaching out to your former colleagues immediately. If we position this right, Maybe we can maintain some of those relationships even without your official position." I stared at him, amazed by his audacity. "Marcus, I lost my job yesterday. Shouldn't you be concerned about how we're going to pay our bills?" "Of course I'm concerned about money," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But the real loss here is strategic. Do you realize how long it took me to build rapport with the Northrise executive team? And now I'll have to start over with some other company's marketing department." "Some other company?" I asked. "You mean where I might find a new job?" "Well, obviously you'll need to find something in the same industry," Marcus replied, as if I were being deliberately obtuse. "Preferably with a company that has even better connections than Northrise. Maybe Dravenmark Capital has openings in their marketing department. Their client base would be perfect for my consulting services." I watched him scrolling through job postings on his laptop, not for me, but presumably researching companies that might benefit his networking goals. This wasn't a husband trying to support his wife through a difficult time. This was a business strategist recalculating his approach to achieving his own objectives. "What if I wanted to try something completely different?" I asked. "Maybe leave marketing altogether and pursue something I'm passionate about." Marcus finally looked up from his screen, his expression incredulous. "Charlotte, this isn't the time for a career change. We need to be smart about this. Your value isn't just your salary, it's your position in the industry. Without that, what do we have to offer?" The way he said "we" made my skin crawl. There was no "we" in his thinking, only Marcus and his schemes, with me serving as his unwitting accomplice. "I'm going to shower," I announced, needing to escape his calculating gaze. In the bathroom, I turned on the water and sat on the edge of the tub, processing his words. "Your value isn't just your salary, it's your position in the industry." He'd reduced our entire relationship to a business transaction. I wondered how long he'd viewed me this way, and whether there had ever been genuine feelings between us. When I emerged from the bathroom 20 minutes later, I could hear Marcus on the phone in the living room. His voice carried a tone I'd never heard before, conspiratorial and intimate. I crept closer to listen, my heart pounding. I know, he was saying. "The timing couldn't be worse. But maybe this is actually an opportunity for us." "Us?" I pressed myself against the wall, straining to hear more. "Charlotte losing her job changes everything," Marcus continued. "I don't have to pretend anymore. She was useful for getting me established. But now..." His voice trailed off as he moved further from the bedroom. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Who was he talking to? And what did he mean about not having to pretend anymore? I grabbed my phone and quietly opened the voice recording app, then crept closer to the living room. Marcus was standing by the window, his back to me, speaking in hushed tones. "Vanessa, you don't understand," he said, and I realized he was talking to his sister. Charlotte's job was everything. The parties, the connections, the social status. That's what made this whole arrangement worthwhile. Arrangement? My hands trembled as I held the phone, making sure it was capturing every word. "I know you think I'm being harsh," Marcus continued, "but you didn't see how she looked at me last night. Like I was supposed to comfort her or something. She doesn't get it. This was never about love. It was about building something bigger." I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping out loud. 3 years of marriage, and he was calling it an arrangement. "Listen," Marcus said, his voice dropping even lower. "There's something else I need to tell you. Remember Gabriel from the Bright Ridge media launch party? We've been seeing each other for about 6 months now." My legs nearly gave out. An affair. He was having an affair. I know, he said, apparently responding to Vanessa's reaction. "But Gabrielle works in brand management at Corswell Electric. She has connections throughout the entertainment industry, and her family owns 3 hotels in downtown Nashville. She's everything Charlotte was supposed to be, but better. I felt bile rising in my throat. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to support both of us, he'd been building a relationship with someone who could provide superior networking opportunities. The plan was to wait until I'd extracted everything useful from Charlotte's professional network, Marcus continued. But now that she's lost her job, there's no point in prolonging this. Gabrielle's already introduced me to 2 potential clients, and her father is considering hiring my firm for their hotel marketing campaigns. I heard him laugh, a sound that chilled me to the bone. Charlotte thinks this is about emotions and marriage vows, he said mockingly. She has no idea that successful people don't make decisions based on feelings. Everything is strategic. I needed her position to launch my career, and now I need Gabrielle's connections to take it to the next level. Of course I feel bad for Charlotte, he added, though his tone suggested otherwise. She's not a terrible person. She's just naive. She actually believed I married her because I loved her. The recording on my phone showed 8 minutes and counting. I had enough evidence to destroy him, but I kept listening, needing to understand the full scope of his betrayal. Gabrielle understands how business works, Marcus went on. She doesn't get emotional when I have to work late or attend industry events. She sees our relationship as a partnership where we both benefit professionally. It's so much more mature than whatever Charlotte thought we had. I heard footsteps approaching and quickly slipped back toward the bedroom, my heart hammering. Marcus appeared in the doorway moments later, his phone call apparently finished. "Hey," he said with a casual smile, as if he hadn't just been planning my replacement. "I was thinking we should start making a list of your professional contacts. We need to reach out before word spreads about your termination." I stared at him. This man I'd shared a bed with for 3 years. This stranger who'd been systematically planning to discard me once I'd served my purpose. He had no idea that I'd just recorded his confession, or that everything he thought he knew about my situation was a lie. "Sure," I managed to say. "Let me just get my laptop." That afternoon, while Marcus was at what he claimed was a client meeting, but was probably a rendezvous with Gabrielle, I sat in our living room with my laptop and my phone, planning my next moves. The recording of his phone call was safely backed up to my cloud storage, along with screenshots of his text messages I'd managed to access while he was in the shower. I called my friend Jasmine, who worked in our company's legal department. "Charlotte," she answered cheerfully, "please tell me you're ready to celebrate your promotion. I've been dying to take you out." "Actually, I need your advice about something more serious," I said. "Hypothetically, if someone discovered their spouse was having an affair and planning to leave them for financial reasons, what would be the best way to protect themselves legally?" There was a pause. "Charlotte, please tell me this is actually hypothetical." "I wish it were," I admitted, and told her everything. The fake job loss, Marcus's reaction, the recorded phone call, and the affair with Gabrielle. "Okay, first of all, document everything," Jasmine said immediately. "Keep that recording safe, and start gathering evidence of your financial contributions to the marriage. If Marcus has been using your income to support his business, you'll want proof of that." "What about the affair?" I asked. "Tennessee is a no-fault divorce state, so adultery doesn't automatically affect asset division," Jasmine explained. "But if you can prove he was planning to leave you for someone with better financial prospects, that could demonstrate fraud or deception, especially if he was using your resources to court his replacement." I spent the next few hours creating a comprehensive file, bank statements showing my income supporting our lifestyle, emails where Marcus discussed business strategies that relied on my connections, photos from industry events where he'd clearly been networking instead of supporting me, and of course the damning phone call recording. By the time Marcus returned home that evening, I had everything organized and safely stored in multiple locations. He walked in with flowers, cheap grocery store roses that looked like an afterthought. "Peace offering," he said, with what I now recognized as his calculated charm smile. "I know I was harsh yesterday. This whole situation has me stressed, but I shouldn't have taken it out on you." "It's okay," I lied. accepting the flowers. I understand you're disappointed. I've been thinking, Marcus continued, settling onto the couch beside me. Maybe this is actually an opportunity. You could find something even better than Northrise. I've been researching companies that might be good fits for your skill set. I had to admire his commitment to the performance. Oh? What did you find? Well, there's Corswell Electric, he said, and I had to fight to keep my expression neutral. They're expanding their marketing department, and they have incredible industry connections. The company president's daughter works there, and she's apparently very well connected in Nashville's business community. Of course, he would suggest Gabrielle's company. The audacity was breathtaking. That sounds promising, I said carefully. How do you know so much about their operations? Marcus's smile flickered for just a moment. I did some research online. Their marketing team has an impressive portfolio. More lies, stacked on top of his foundation of deception. I wondered if he'd ever told me the truth about anything during our relationship. I have some good news, I announced, deciding it was time to begin my counterattack. I heard back from Northrise today. Apparently, there was a mistake with my termination. They want me to come in tomorrow to discuss my options. The relief that flooded Marcus's face was almost comical. Really? That's fantastic. What kind of options? I'm not sure yet, I said innocently. But it sounds promising. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, recalculating his timeline for discarding me, now that I might still be useful. The next morning, I dressed in my best suit and left the apartment, telling Marcus I was going to Northrise for my meeting. Instead, I drove to Corswell Electric's downtown office building. It had taken me exactly 3 phone calls the night before to confirm that Gabrielle Wellington worked there as brand manager, and that she was indeed the daughter of hotel mogul Charles Wellington. I parked across the street and waited. At 11:30 a.m., I saw Marcus's silver sedan pull into the parking garage. 20 minutes later, he emerged with a striking blonde woman wearing an expensive dress and carrying a designer handbag. They walked to a nearby cafe, their body language unmistakably intimate. I followed at a distance and positioned myself at a table where I could observe them clearly. They sat close together, her hand resting on his arm as he showed her something on his phone. When she laughed at whatever he was saying, she leaned in and kissed his cheek, a gesture that felt like a knife twisting in my chest, not because I still loved him, but because of the sheer brazenness of his deception. I took several photos with my phone, making sure to capture their faces clearly and document the timestamps. Then I called the cafe and asked to speak with the manager. "Hi, this might sound strange," I said when she came to the phone, "but I'm a private investigator working on a case. I'm currently observing 2 people at table 7, the man in the navy suit and the blonde woman. Would it be possible to get a receipt showing the date and time if they pay with a credit card?" "I can't give you private financial information," she said. "But I can confirm if someone was here at a specific time if you have a legitimate legal reason." "That would be perfect," I said. "I'll be in touch." Marcus and Gabrielle spent nearly 2 hours together, and their goodbye was anything but professional. I had enough evidence to prove the affair, but I wanted more. I wanted to understand exactly how he'd been using my professional relationships to court his replacement. That evening, Marcus returned home with an unusual amount of energy. He practically bounced through the door, humming under his breath. "Good news," he announced. "I landed a new client today. Corswell Electric wants to hire me for a marketing consultation project." I looked up from my laptop, feigning surprise. "Wow, that's amazing. How did you hear about the opportunity?" "Just good timing," he said vaguely. "I've been networking in the right circles." "What's the scope of the project?" I asked, curious to see how much he would lie. "Brand positioning for their hospitality division," Marcus replied. "Apparently they're expanding their hotel partnerships and need fresh marketing strategies." Everything clicked into place. Gabrielle had given him insider information about her father's business expansion, And Marcus was using our joint savings to fund his consulting materials while positioning himself as an industry expert. He was literally using my money to impress his affair partner's family. "That's wonderful, honey," I said sweetly. "When do you start?" "Next week. And the best part is, if this goes well, they might introduce me to some of their partner companies. This could be the breakthrough I've been working toward." I nodded enthusiastically while mentally calculating how much of our joint money he'd been spending on his relationship with Gabrielle. The expensive dinners he claimed were client meetings, the new clothes he'd bought for important presentations, the sudden interest in luxury hotels where he said he was researching industry trends. It had all been courting activities funded by my income. "I'm so proud of you," I said, meaning every word ironically. "You've worked so hard for this opportunity." Marcus beamed, completely oblivious to the fact that his wife had just spent the day documenting his adultery and was planning to destroy every aspect of his carefully constructed deception. "Tomorrow, I tell him about my promotion," I said to myself after he went to bed. And then the real fun begins. Within 6 months, Marcus's entire scheme had collapsed spectacularly. When I revealed his affair and manipulative behavior to our professional network, word spread quickly through Nashville's tight-knit business community. Corswell Electric terminated his consulting contract immediately after Gabrielle's father learned about the relationship, and several other potential clients withdrew their interest once they discovered how he'd been exploiting personal relationships for business gain. His reputation as an opportunistic social climber made him virtually unemployable in the industry he'd tried so hard to infiltrate. Gabrielle, faced with the embarrassment of her father's disappointment and the revelation of Marcus's calculated approach to their relationship, ended their affair and transferred to her family's hotel operations in Atlanta. Marcus, left with no income, no prospects, and a network of burned bridges, was forced to move back in with his mother in Memphis while working at a call center to pay his bills. Meanwhile, my promotion to vice president had opened doors I'd never imagined, leading to speaking engagements, board positions, and genuine friendships with people who valued my expertise rather than my connections. As I stood in my new corner office, overlooking the Nashville skyline, I reflected on how testing Marcus had revealed not just his true nature, but my own strength and worth. Sometimes the most devastating betrayals become the greatest gifts, freeing us to discover who we really are when we stop trying to be what others need us to be.